hello again, Titans. We are back for another installment of our Titan Table Talks. I am Dr. Bobby Porter. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at CSUF. This dialogue is being brought to you by my office, the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs, in partnership with the Office of the President and Alumni Engagement and Government Relations. So again, welcome. Before we get started, I have a few logistical details for our program that I want to share with you and some tips to ensure you are able to engage in this dialogue. For one, this event is being broadcasted on Zoom webinar, so your cameras and your microphones will be off the entire time. If you would like to engage with our panel or team behind the scenes, please use the Q&A function in the menu bar below. This event is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the DIEP, Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs, to our YouTube channel with closed captioning available. And then lastly, at the very end of our dialogue, you will receive a feedback link to help us improve this program, as well as details to provide us details for future events. So with that all being said, today our panelists will be engaging in a dialogue about resiliency among women with the help of our moderator, Dr. Bey Ling Sha. But before we get to that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the Cal State Fullerton, she's going to kill me for saying this, First Lady, Julie Burgee, who is here to give some opening remarks. Julie, thank you again for joining us.
An absolute pleasure and honor to be with all of you, to listen to these incredible panelists and have some robust dialogue. This is one of the most crucial conversations we can have, resiliency among women. My goodness, we are survivors, aren't we? We have the grit, the tenacity, the resiliency as women, as community members, as family leaders, as leaders, period. I'm so incredibly blessed to know that we have come through it. We're survivors, right? The last 2 years, especially during pandemic, during social injustice and unrest, in righting the wrongs, in seeing through the fog, the clouds, all of these things, women have been at the forefront. You know, we held it together. And I welcome everybody here today to take part in this conversation of holding it together and being so resilient. Our social norms, our gender norms, we've had to adjust things, and yet we've still been expected to be the caregivers, the taking care of our elders, our children, our spouse partners, and guess what? Ourselves, usually at the bottom of the list, right? That's kind of how we roll. We definitely had a lot of gender norms imposed on us to be the caregivers, the nurturers, and to support society through pandemic and through all of the other horrific things that have happened in our culture. And now we're in war, right? Our first responders, those women on the front lines, thank you. So proud to know that we are arm in arm together in moving through these times. I have had the absolute distinct pleasure to help empower girls and women worldwide, the blessing of my life probably. And here I am, the mother of 4 sons, and yet I so believe in the power and the resiliency in women that I fight every day to keep that rolling. I've had the distinct pleasure to work in Oaxaca for years, I think 10 years, empowering women, the poorest of the poor, the bottom of the pyramid, to build them up, provide skills to empower their families through microfinance, through self-sufficiency. That's what it's all about, isn't it? In my beloved Rwanda, a lot of you know, Fram and I have a nonprofit in Rwanda called Yambi Rwanda, which means embrace Rwanda. Genocide survivors. It's the most humbling thing I've ever done in my life, to be honest. Empowering women to learn how to sew, teaching business skills, because you can sew all you want, but guess what? You need to sell those goods and to provide for your family. supporting preschool girls to get them going on that trajectory towards education, keeping them in school, allowing them to fall in love with learning. I can go on with all of that. And then my beloved Cal State Fullerton women, whether it's professors, staff, and certainly our students, what a special group to provide resources for and empowerment for. This is the most resilient group of people I've ever had the pleasure of being arm in arm with. And I'm just proud to be at Cal State Fullerton to see the good work in teaching empowerment and diversity. I take every opportunity I can to be a mentor, whether it's in the College of Business or just one-on-one with our guardian scholars, whatever it is. And here we are today, right? We're talking about this topic, telling our stories. Every single one of our students, staff, and faculty have a story. It is so important to hear these stories. It gives me inspiration, and I know it gives you inspiration. So as a community of women, we know education is power. We're here together today and every day to hear these stories, to empower each other, to provide more resiliency, to feed each other. And I can't wait to see and encourage the conversation today. So welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Julie. So I rushed Julie's introduction, but y'all, that was very special. We love our campus president. Pham does an incredible job. He's so supportive of these events and opens every one of our table talks with a welcome. But as we were coming up on this very special table talk for Women's History Month, I'm so pleased that Julie said yes to taking Pham's place and providing a welcome, warming up our crowd. So Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So with that, let's get to our conversation today. So as I mentioned earlier, our conversation today will be moderated by my good friend, Dr. Bey Ling Sha. Dr. Sha serves as the Dean of the College of Communications here at Cal State Fullerton. She is a higher education leader, whose work has influenced public relations scholarship, education, and practice. Dr. Sha's primary research program examines the intersection of identity and public relations. Very exciting topic. In 2019, Dr. Sha was honored by the Public Relations Society of America with its D. Park Gibson Pioneer Award, which is the society's highest individual honor presented to a PR professional who has contributed to the increased awareness of public relations within multicultural communities and has participated in promoting issues, that meet the needs of these diverse communities. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad, Dr. Sha. So with that being said, I will get out of the way and welcome Bey Ling. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Porter, for the introduction. And thank you, First Lady Julie Virgie, for your opening remarks. I am so truly pleased to have this opportunity to moderate what I know will be an engaging conversation on the resilience of women, all women, including those so born and those currently identifying. As we know, resilience refers to an individual's capacity to thrive in the face of trauma, whether significant or sustained. Obviously, we're all together right now in the sustained trauma being caused by the COVID pandemic. And I'd also like to pause for just a moment in recognition of today's significant one-year anniversary of the Atlanta spa shootings. Before I introduce today's amazing panelists and invite them to share their stories of resilience, I'd like to acknowledge that while resilience is most definitely a worthy and admirable quality in anyone, the fact that resilience is needed at all for women to thrive or even to survive in this world, that fact speaks to the progress that is still needed to make our diverse world one that is truly equitable, inclusive, and just for all. From the disproportionate lack of women in many leadership roles to the persistent gendered pay gap in nearly all fields, from the daily risks and microaggressions faced by women to the continued entitlement that some people feel to the attention, time, and bodies of women. From the differential rates of violence against women to the inequitable media coverage of that violence, depending on what kind of woman received or survived it. All these challenges and more are why resilience remains needed among women, for women, within women. So here today to share their stories of resilience are three very special Titan women. Lucy Santana is the CEO of Girls Incorporated of Orange County, where she has worked since 1999, joining the organization only a few years after she graduated from Cal State Fullerton. Lucy is inspired by the participants in the programs offered by Girls Incorporated, by their learning, their growth, and their successes, as well as by the nonprofit's generous donors. Lucy is also inspired by her own daughter, hoping that she, along with the thousands of girls in Orange County, will all get to grow up in a society that is equitable and safe for them, and that values women for our inherent strengths and contributions. Next, Sharon Shares is also a Cal State Fullerton alumna, graduating at the top of her class in the Department of Communications. Despite her academic success, Sharon battled the glass ceiling in the male-dominated company where she previously worked, where she felt left out of the boys' club and limited in her growth opportunities. So on the side, she started a YouTube channel that she's going to talk about, and that YouTube channel grew very quickly to 20,000 subscribers within only 8 months. With this newfound empowerment, Sharon joined a mentorship program for women, and she now works in her dream job as a producer at a creative design agency. Kristen Mai Pham graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a major in business management, and she has applied her education to her professional success as an author, screenwriter, and copywriter. Kristen, or Mai, has published 13 creative works that focus on her cultural identity and her experiences in embracing that identity. 3 of her essays have been accepted into the UC Irvine Library Southeast Asian Archive for preservation. So welcome to Lucy, to Sharon, and to Mai. Before we get to our prepared questions and potential questions from the audience, I'd like to invite each of y'all to share a story of resilience for about 5 to 7 minutes. Lucy, I know you're going first, and while you get ready, let me just remind the audience that all of y'all are invited to write in with your questions for our panelists by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So with that, Lucy, take it away.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's so it's exciting to be a Titan. Continue to just be so impressed with how the university continues to grow and thrive, and the fact that so many of your students and faculty are women as well. So that's amazing. So I'd like to start today with just very quickly sharing about my story of resilience, right? And I know that we're going to be asked several questions, and I think that it'll be part of the further discussion. But one of the things that I have to say is, first of all, I will say is that the organization that is very near and dear to my heart and that I've been here since 1999 is Girls Inc. of Orange County. And our mission statement is inspiring girls to be strong, smart, and bold. And I bring that up because it's about everything that we do each and every day, about teaching girls resilience in growing up, anywhere from as young as kindergarten all the way through high school and post-high school graduation. So when COVID hit and we had to make some pretty quick decisions, I had to just kind of look into what's the toolkit that we use and the tools that we teach our girls to be resilient, how to overcome challenges, those that can be traumatic, as it was shared earlier, or those that are just in the background, right, or happening each and every day. And as we all talk about, I am a CEO with a very demanding job, but I'm also a mom and a wife. And my story of resilience has to start at home because we went into COVID when my daughter was in 4th grade, and we had to go into virtual learning, and that was quite the challenge. My husband and I both being educated, my daughter having all the resources that she needed, we still struggled. We struggled with the fact that all of a sudden she was cut off of her friends, relationships, And because we were in the school, I didn't have a lot of friends' phone numbers and how to reach their parents. So slowly we began to kind of try to build a way for her to stay connected with some of her peers. But I really feel like it was such a learning for myself and my husband to really be able to manage my daughter, each of us being in a bedroom, sharing the Wi-Fi. I know that I can get a lot of you share these stories, but it really was an issue of I needed to focus on my girl before I could focus on all the other girls in Orange County, but we were doing it simultaneously. And then to have had school, finish fourth grade and doing all of fifth grade remotely was really tough. And I am now seeing the repercussions of that. I'm seeing that she's back in school full time and back with her friends, but I still see those instances of insecurity and confidence of being back in a place where she is sharing and convening with a lot of girls her own age and now managing relationships with other boys. So it has been quite the journey in terms of trying to get her to a new normal from her school perspective and really beginning to enjoy school again, because I will share that we went through a process of her just indicating that school maybe wasn't as exciting as it used to be. And then on the work front, had to be resilient, had to lead an organization through these issues when our organization was primarily school-based. We partner with schools. And so when we were not able to go back into the classroom space to continue to offer our programs for girls about resilience, about goal setting, about self-confidence, that was really detrimental to how we were going to be able to do our work. Very proud that my team stepped up, showed their creativity, showed their resilience in being able to say, we've got this. We're just going to do this differently. We're going to start connecting with all the girls through phone, text, and we quickly went into the YouTube space. We created over 100 videos on YouTube that were both fun, educational, and engaging, and giving them that self-esteem they needed to. We did science, technology, engineering, and math, all in that space, but also had a virtual prom, had virtual activities where girls can really engage and kind of feel like they had something to turn to. And then we started being able to do interactive, synchronous and asynchronous programming. So for us, when I think about my story of resilience, was one that I had to be at home in the next room, making sure that my daughter was in school and doing well, and then also making sure that we were still able to reach girls throughout Orange County in the best way possible. And they showed up. They showed up through virtual settings. We did Canvas, we did Zoom, and we were able to provide programs. And actually, we were able to grow. In the last year and a half, we actually grew from serving 3,000 girls to over 4,000 girls during a pandemic. So for us, that was the story of resilience, because we were able to show up for the girls and they showed up for us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That's amazing. And there's so much that you talked about that I know we want to come back and explore some more. But first, let's get an initial story of resilience from Sharon.
Hello. Thank you so much for, first of all, the honor of inviting me. It is absolute pleasure to be here. I am so excited to share my story with you guys. And first off, I'd love to just start with explaining a little bit of my background for some context, which is when I was younger, I was always raised to be, take no for an answer, be the go-getter, always just push. And so that's what I did. I got my straight A's. I was always kind of fighting back when I had that opportunity to be the best and achieve the best. While on the side, also going to school, I was also in acting as a kid too. So what was interesting about that is like going to school and day and then doing auditions after school, and having that acting side allowed me to have more of that, be a professional young adult from that early age and kind of be used to like, okay, this is how you are in front of people and this is how to be professional and working kind of from that young age. But growing up, because I was always been told to go for the best and do the best, that was always part of my mindset. I didn't realize at the time that it was like, oh no, if there's an issue, you can just overcome it. So with that, I was able to get, become valedictorian even at Cal State Fullerton, which was an amazing opportunity for me. I was made sure I got an internship every summer, and I was like, okay, this is going to set me up for success, like after graduation. So after graduation, I was able to get awesome opportunities working at different companies. But when I started working at these companies is when I realized that, there is a point to where you can't that this is where the resiliency is really tested, essentially. So my goal was the same at these companies as it was being in school, which is just follow the rules and you're going to go up. And I realized very quickly that in the work life, it doesn't work like school life. You kind of have to like figure it out as you go. And one of my things was I was trying to always get better, get to that next level, upgrade my career growth. But I was at this one company where it was male dominated, and it felt like I was stagnant there. No matter what I tried to do, no matter what changes I brought to the company, it just felt like there was always an excuse for me to not get promoted, excuses for me feeling kind of left out of the conversation at times. So I, of course, started thinking initially, well, what is it with me? What do I need to be doing differently? I started going to this mentorship program on the side called Worked Up, where they paired me up with a mentor and some other mentees in the group. And as I was kind of sharing my experiences with me at work and with the team and everything, my mentor really highlighted to me like, no, this is not a normal situation. You are doing what you can to get to the next level, and it's just being stagnant for you. So she recommended that, we worked together to come to the conclusion that I should be really looking to the side for more different opportunities to get to that next level. One of the things I did on the side, because I really missed my creative background, is I started a YouTube channel. But before doing that, and the reason I started that YouTube channel is because I had followed this one particular channel called Jubilee, and they were looking for people to be on a special episode just for this series where they judge who's like an amateur, fraud, and expert at a random topic. So I got invited to be on that episode. And after being on that episode, people from that channel said, hey, Sharon, you should start a channel. And it really like sparked my fire again of like, oh, like this is what it's like to pursue your passions again. And just really like go out and go after it again. So I started that channel and started making videos, and it grew crazy fast. I was like, oh, wow, like I have my own autonomy here. I'm not feeling like I'm trapped, in a different setting where I can't grow. So that was my really awesome outlet to do on the side. It's a channel called Sharon Shares ASMR. It's a YouTube channel that focuses on like relaxation and ASMR, focused on travel stories and languages and things like that, because I love my passion for learning, and I mix that with my passion for travel and relaxation, and just basically put it all in one for a YouTube channel. So, so basically I put it there. And then I also I finally got my dream job after applying over and over again for opportunities at one company. And now I eventually became a producer at a creative design agency while still maintaining that channel. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm totally going to check out your YouTube channel because I definitely need more relaxation tips. But meanwhile, let's hear a story of resilience from our third panelist, Mai.
Hi, everyone. I am so honored to be here today. So my story begins in the summer of 1975, when my family and I first arrived in America, having just fled Vietnam from the end of the war. We settled in Orange, California, and that's where I was enrolled in kindergarten. At the time, I was the only Vietnamese child in the entire school. And let me tell you, I could not be more different than the other kids. I couldn't speak or read English. Everyone looked at me and thought I dressed and looked weird. And as you can probably guess, I got bullied a lot. From kids, adults, everyone, you name it. The last thing you want to do is to stick out as awkwardly as I did as a 5-year-old. If there was a title to this chapter of my life, the title of that would be I Hate Who I Am, and I Hate Where I Came From. My mom used to take me to the grocery store with her all the time, and she would spend a ridiculous amount of time in the produce section. So all kids know that produce is boring. So, of course, I would end up in the candy section, which is the cool section of the store, right? Unfortunately, as soon as my mom would turn around and see that I was not standing there, she would yell out my name at the top of her lungs, my. And this was so embarrassing. So I'd run back to her as fast as my little legs could take me. Not surprisingly, amongst the many things that I hated about myself was my weird foreign sounding name, Mai. Somewhere around that time, something happened to me that further solidified my self-hatred. One day, my older brother was driving us around somewhere and a car pulled up next to us. In the car were teenage boys and they started yelling at us, "You effing gooks." I didn't know what a gook was, but what I did know was that seemed to be a very bad thing. And in that moment, I could not feel more worthless about myself. For the next few years, my self-hatred and shame about my cultural identity became my constant companion. I wanted to be American so badly. I wanted this more than anything in the world. I just wanted to fit in. About the time I turned 15, I finally became a US citizen, and I had the opportunity to officially change my name. And boy, I could not wait to do that. So somewhere before that, I had met a girl named Kristen. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and she was a cheerleader. So Kristen was everything that I wanted to be. So of course, I legally changed my name to Kristen. And now I was finally the new American me. Not long after that, I met an intriguing girl, and she was Vietnamese of all things. This girl was really confident. But what struck me most about her was that she was confident about being Vietnamese. Sometimes she even spoke Vietnamese when we were amongst all Americans, and she wasn't ashamed, not at all. And this truly intrigued me. So we started to hang out. I went to parties with her where I met more Vietnamese kids. I ate Vietnamese food with her and even listened to Vietnamese music. It was like I was submerging myself in a world a brand new world, but that it was actually there all the time. So this next chapter of my life would be called Learning to Love Myself. And when I learned to love myself, what those teenage boys in that car, and what they called me, no longer mattered. I even learned to love my name because that's who I am. And what I learned from this experience is that being different is actually unique. And that's actually a great thing. Something to be celebrated, actually. So one night at a high school party, a boy came up to me and asked me what my name was. And proudly, I told him that my name is Mai. Looking back, what I realized about my life was that I just needed a role model. Someone like me who was proud of who they were. And someday, I hope to pay it forward and to be that role model for some young girl who needs a little help learning to love herself. And that's the end of my story.
Thank you so much, Mai, for sharing that powerful story. That resonates with me so much, especially as someone whose parents did not give her the chance to change her name when they applied for her citizenship. I totally feel you. So if Sharon and Lucy could join us, please, by turning on your cameras, that would be great. And we'll kick off the conversation. I think listening to y'all's stories of resilience, what really strikes me is the impact that childhood experiences can have on who we are as grown women, right? From what Mai shared in terms of her experiences as an immigrant to the United States, to what Sharon shared in terms of being raised to push and fight back and to follow the rules, to what Lucy shared about raising your daughter and preparing all young girls to be ready for the best and brightest future that they can possibly have. Clearly, you know, what we experience as young girls does impact where we are as women. So I think my first question is, if I could direct it to Lucy, based on what you see in your work with Girls Incorporated, how can adults of any gender really help younger people, especially young girls, in those really formative stages to develop into strong, confident, bold women, as is your motto?
What a great question. I will say that the first thing is that, you know, we work with all girls, as I mentioned, kindergarten through early college. And a lot of the work that we do is when you have a girl come into your program, whether they're coming in elementary, middle, or high school, they have the similar needs. And when we develop our programs, they're developed for girls of all ages, backgrounds, ethnic groups. We tend to serve a large majority of girls that tend to be the first in their family that maybe might be graduating from high school, might be the first in their family to go to college. And so for us, we really want to make sure that they have access to others to see their story, their journey, and to learn from that. And I love, you know, Mai and Bey Ling, your stories about, you know, growing up as an immigrant and really kind of finding your true self, right? And that is part of the journey that we ask our girls to do as well, is understanding who they are and being confident about who they are. But I think the other thing is when we talk to our girls about jobs, careers, self-confidence, learning to make good choices and decisions and how they're going to do those, we also talk about the fact that they have to see it to believe it, right? So if they're able to see somebody who has been able to overcome some of the same challenges that they're dealing with, whether they're being raised in a single parent family home, low income, you know, less resources, etc., that they can see that there is a way out and then there's an opportunity to do that. So we really, you know, our first line of mentors is our educators that we hire to facilitate our programs. The second is we do engage volunteers, both men and women, in all walks of life and all different backgrounds, because we want to make sure that girls are being exposed to that. So we do that through career panels, speakers come in. We, you know, even in our early literacy programs, when we're working with our kindergartners to third grade girls, and we're teaching them the importance of learning how to read, every book that we read to our girls has a female protagonist. And that's because we want them to know and learn about these stories early on. So whether it's a fiction book or whether it's a biography, you know, whether it's about a Supreme Court justice or a woman in business or, you know, or a local mayor who's a woman of color, it's important for them to start seeing those. So anybody in the community that gets involved really does serve as that mentor. And that's one of the big pieces and the success of our programs is that they have to be exposed. They have to be able to see what's beyond their, you know, initial horizon. And that's how we really work to make sure that they're able to get some other stories in their lives and to see others succeed around them.
Yeah, I love that so much. One of the questions that's already come in through the chat is asking the panelists about our role models. So I'm wondering, Sharon or Mai, if you want to talk about role models that you had growing up, or to talk about ways in which you try to be a role model for others.
Sure, I could jump in here. It might seem a little surprising or weird, but I actually felt like one of my role models growing up was my brother. He's only 1.5 years older than me, but I don't know, there was just something about him that he always knew the right things to say. He always was like my support system, especially throughout my story that I was sharing. Like, he was there for me when it was very, very tough and reassuring me that, you know, it's that I just got to keep going a little bit longer, keep fighting through a little bit longer, and then the opportunity will come. So I think like family, I mean, of course, my mentor as well from the mentorship program was awesome. But surprisingly, family can be a really great role model as well, of course.
Totally. Mai?
I'm going to echo what Sharon said, but so I have two role models. When I was a child, my role model was Audrey Hepburn. I always felt like she was both beautiful on the inside as well as beautiful on the outside. Obviously, you know, a lot of people know her work from representativities and so forth, but she did so much humanitarian work later in her life. And I feel like if she was such a genuine person, and she just had a look of kindness to her. And so she was my role model when I was younger. When I say I have two role models, what I mean is as I grew up and learned more about the story of my parents, my mother became my role model as an adult. And I actually didn't understand my mother when I was younger. I mean, she was just always that weird foreign mother, and I was that weird foreign kid, right? So all the other mothers were so like cool, and they always knew how to make cupcakes and stuff. And my mother had no idea what a cupcake was, right? But what I realized as I got older is she actually had to reinvent her life, not one time, but twice. In 1954, when she was living up in North Vietnam, they had to leave everything behind to go to South Vietnam because they were pro-democratic, and they literally left everything. And if all your family did not leave with you, you were not allowed to correspond with them after that. So she had to leave everything back in 1954. And then again, she lost everything in 1975 when we had to leave the country. So twice she had to reinvent herself. And she was actually kind of like a socialite when we were back in Vietnam. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, she was in the upper class, and she became an assembler here in America. She worked, you know, she got up at 4 a.m. and went to her job, learned how to speak English. I mean, she spoke a little bit of English, but, you know, she really didn't. And she learned how to speak English and drive a car in America. And she just completely went from, you know, a bourgeois life to a working class mother. And I feel like that was a huge transformation. So that's why later in life, when I learned the story of who my mother really was, she became my hero.
Yeah, definitely. Our mothers look so much smarter now, right, than when we were younger. My role model growing up was not my mother. It was actually Marie Curie, because I was just so fascinated that this woman could go off and do her own independent research, her own scholarship. And, you know, somebody asked Marie Curie once, what's it like to be married to a genius? Because her husband was also a scientist. And her response to that person was, go ask my husband. You know, I just loved that. So bringing it to the present from the past, I'm wondering if y'all would like to share a little bit about role models that you've seen in the current pandemic, whether it's the health pandemic or the newly intensified racism pandemic. Who have you all looked to, either, you know, big picture or just in your own worlds? Who have you looked to that has helped you to adjust in these current times? In terms of the resilience, anyone?
I can jump in. I would say kind of bringing it to my circle when I joined this mentorship program, it was during the start of COVID and it was all virtual. So, you know, that was how we would stay connected. But my mentor then, when, you know, things were happening, the chaos in the world, that would be, even though our focus was on like growth and career growth mostly, it was still also bringing in a little bit of what's happening in life, what's happening in current events into that conversation, making sure we're all okay, seeing what steps we can do to kind of help with the situation, how we should reach out. And so I think just that mentorship program was really a nice thing to have during that.
So I'll jump in. There's not one specific person, but there was a group. And what I will say is that as everything was happening, and Girls Inc. is part of a national organization, so we have a listserv, if you will, of all of us that serve as CEOs of our affiliates throughout the nation, 78 of us. And because it sort of rolled out from, sort of the East Coast to the West Coast, there was emails flying all over the place of, my colleagues that were dealing with COVID and the shutdowns on a rolling basis. And it was that their resiliency and seeing how they were managing the day-to-day and honestly hour by hour of that was what I was able to look to and to reach out to and say, like, oh my gosh, can you tell me, what was it that you were able to do? And really also here in Orange County, I'm part of a group of 10 of us that are all CEOs of mid-size, large organizations here in Orange County. And we met on a regular basis. And we were literally like making decisions on an ongoing basis. I mean, when we think about the stress level that we were all under in terms of, understanding how we were going to maintain the level of business of our organizations, from either making sure that we were going to be able to continue the youth that needed our programs, whether we were going to, figure out the funding that we needed for our programs, were we going to have to lay off staff? What kind of decisions were we going to have to make if money wasn't coming into the organization? And I just really lean on these group of women, really, that were just like, we all had our moments when we broke down, but we all had the moments where we were uplifting each other, and just knowing that we were not alone in this space was so critical, and just reminding us, like, to shut down for today, go and take a walk, do something, have a glass of wine. That was a lot of times, the conversation, but it was really about just knowing that you had somebody there who understood what you were going through. And I think that that was just really important from a group mentoring perspective.
Yeah, totally. And actually, that was one of our prepared questions, right? Was what shifted in your mind, or what shifted in your approach and being able to do your work during the pandemic? And clearly having a support group of others was helpful to you. Lucy, was there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, actually, I think as the CEO of my organization, the things that had to shift in my mind immediately was the flexibility, right? Being flexible, allowing my team to be creative, building trust within my team, because we all used to be in office. We'd all show up every morning, work together, and then we'd all go off to do our thing. And now all of a sudden we were all working remotely. We had to trust that everybody was working at the level that they had to. And so that was something that was really important for me to build with our team, with my management team, and to really be able to get through that. And I think also being open to learn and to grow professionally. I feel like I consider myself a life learner, but this really kind of stretched us in terms of understanding not just how to run a nonprofit, being a human services organization, serving the needs of people that need that, but it was also running like a business and staying viable and being able to still be relevant and being able to talk to our donors about how we needed to do business differently. So I think for us, as our minds shifted, I needed to make sure that, one, my team felt supported. And the other thing is that we all as adults were going through the pandemic right along with our schools, our girls. And so we had to be okay to be able to show up for the girls. So that was really a huge mind shift that I think I was really proud that we were able to do that pretty quickly and early on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I do want to come back to this notion of self-care and taking care of ourselves so that we can serve others. But meanwhile, would Sharon or Mai like to chime in on sharing what shifted in your mind or what shifted in your approach to doing your work during the pandemic?
Sure, I'll jump in. So, and kind of just, I guess, dovetail from the last question, one of the things that I really appreciated from the organization I worked with in terms of the pandemic was that they made it a real point to ask us how we were doing in our personal life, because obviously it's not just working from home and being remote. It's literally like there's a pandemic going on. This is completely unprecedented territory for everybody. Nobody knows what's going on, and it's scary, like maybe it's really scary, maybe it's not that scary. We don't know. We're in the beginning stages of it. So they were really very, very aware and cognizant of the emotional impact to us. And they would ask us literally, how are you feeling? Are you worried? Are you nervous? How's your family? Because that really was, it's just a huge monumental shift, I think, for everybody, right? So I really appreciated that. It wasn't just like, how are you able to work? How are you able to like deal with the Zooms and everything? But how are you feeling? Are you scared? Are you anxious? I mean, you know, things like that. So I really appreciated that. But in terms of like my shift, being a writer is a pretty solitary thing. So, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not a huge shift, but it actually did create like an awareness that I needed to not be too solitary, and to still connect with my friends, my family, and my colleagues as much as possible, because stories and you know, whether I'm writing a fictional story, I'm writing like a autobiographical essay, it all comes from human experience, and you really can't write about the human experience if you don't have human interaction. So I became more aware of my solitariness, or my solitude. And I think I just made up a word right there. Sorry about that. But I became more aware of it. So I just wanted to, I needed to specifically remind myself to connect with people, to take breaks, to connect with people, to go outside and not like be stuck in this new world that has some advantages as a writer, because you definitely have a lot more less distraction, but really if you become disconnected from the world, you become disconnected from your stories, if that makes any sense. So that's how it shifted. It made me more aware of the solitude. And so I became more cognizant of still staying connected somehow, whether it's a text, a phone call, an email, whatever.
Yeah, totally. Sharon, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and kind of jumping off of that, I actually am a very social person myself. So when the pandemic started and suddenly everything was remote, I was like, oh, it's so weird not to see anyone, and kind of feel trapped a bit. So I was able to take that time to actually put it more into that hobby of that YouTube channel and pursue that further. And I think that helped me connect with the community, since I wasn't able to see people in person. And for me, that definitely was tough. I think another thing I had to remind myself from like a work-life balance standpoint is to make sure I set aside time to go outside once a day and you know, actually see the sun and go on a hike, because it was very easy to like fall into this pattern of just staying inside all the time, which was contributing to like also feeling not happy about working remote. But I was able to now find this balance of like working remote, as long as I set these key boundaries on when to go outside, when to make time for certain situations. So that way I'm still kind of living life with that sort of outside element too.
Yeah, and Sharon, let me stay with you for the next question, because I think you're kind of moving to this question of self-care, right, as part of resilience. And what we've heard on the panel is staying in touch with others, being in community, making sure that we connect with mentors or people facing similar challenges. Sharon, you talked about going outside. What other concrete tips would you offer for self-care?
Yeah, I would say if it's safe and you're working remotely, if you have the opportunity to work remotely from a different place, like every couple days or so, just having like a different surrounding can make you feel better. At least for me, that definitely helped, because I thought like, oh, what does it matter if you're inside here versus inside there? But it really does change your mindset to like get out and go to a different place and work from there. And I think also from that self-care, it's really important to give yourself guidelines to say, hey, I'm going to work from this time to this time and stop. Because otherwise you'll just be like, oh, just one more email, and it'll like keep going. But if you put that on your calendar, on your schedule, I think it's easier to follow that.
Yeah, I love it. Book self-care just like we book everything else in our lives. Sure.
Exactly.
Mai or Lucy, do y'all want to jump in with self-care tips?
I would say for me, self-care has to do with maintaining positive self-talk. So as a writer, there's this thing called imposter syndrome, which It's basically, I mean, I'm probably not going to explain it in very elegant terms, but it's just basically always thinking that you don't know what you're talking about. You have no right to be doing what you're doing. You're just fake. And at some point, someone's gonna some people are gonna realize, oh my God, this girl's a total fraud. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's not a real writer. So for me, self-care has to do with just maintaining positive self-talk. It's so easy to be kind to other people, but to not be so kind to yourself. You're usually, I'll speak just for myself. I am usually my biggest critic. And that should not be the case. I should be aware of where I can improve, but also I need to give myself the same amount of uplifting feedback and support that I try to give to other people. So for me, self-care has to do with self-talk and just making sure that I'm not my biggest critic, that I'm critical, but constructively critical of myself, and that I give myself credit where I deserve it.
Yeah, and I'll add that, the literature on imposter syndrome shows that it's more prevalent in women than in men. It's more prevalent in communities of color compared to not. For our students who might be watching, imposter syndrome is really common among first-gen college students compared to students whose parents also went to college. It's definitely a phenomenon that I think many communities struggle with, right? And your point, I think, Mai, is really well taken, that self-care is not just about the physical, it's also about the psychological self-care and the emotional self-care that we need to do, right? Lucy, self-care tips.
Yeah, and I want to just add on to the imposter syndrome, because it is something that is real among our young girls as well. And it is something that we address all the time. We have a quite a comprehensive program on college and career readiness. And as we are working with first-gen students, a lot of them a lot of times don't feel the support system within their homes because they are the first in their family, right? And so they go through this whole imposter syndrome thing. So before they even start going through it, we address it. We put it out in the front. This is what could happen. This is how you overcome this. This is what you need to do to ensure that you are, it's the self-confidence conversation to the next level, right? About making sure that they understand how to address that. And that's why it is important for them to have mentors and others around them to support them. And a lot of what we talk about is part of that self-care, that positive self-talk, and really making sure that you're doing that. So I just think it's so important, and it's something that we should be talking about quite a bit. So I think for me, self-care is a couple of things. And the first thing was that, when I just need to know when to disconnect and spend quality time with my daughter and my husband. And it really is about making sure that she doesn't see me on the computer all the time or talking on the phone all the time. And so really creating a space where she feels like she's number one, right? And of course, my husband as well. But I think that it's easier said than done. So it really is about knowing, even if it's once a week or something, just shutting down at a certain time and doing that. And for me, now that she's back at school, is giving those surprises that are great for me and for her, where I can pick her up right after school. That, believe it or not, it goes a long way when I can do that, because she doesn't have to stay after school and we can spend some quality time by ourselves. But the other, for me, is just also being okay with not doing anything, just disconnecting and literally just watching Netflix or whatever that makes no sense or is like reality TV. Pre-COVID, I never watched reality shows or any of that. And it really is sometimes my brain, even if I'm trying to watch a TV show or a documentary, my brain is still working. So I figured I need to watch something where I can just really do that. So I've given myself permission to do that. And I feel better when I'm able to do it. And sometimes it's just finding some alone time to just kind of focus on me. And it really isn't necessarily reading a book, although once in a while it's a book or a magazine or something like that. But I think the other thing is, because I'm in a position here at work where I need to role model that behavior, I've also had to learn how to be an empathetic supervisor or a boss or a manager, to where I can really give that space for my team to take a mental day off. And that's what we instituted. We looked at, giving our folks, mental health days off outside of our regular holiday schedule and all of that, but also encouraging them to disconnect and make sure that they were focusing on themselves as well. So it has been part of the conversation now for the last year and a half. We looked at, before we approved our budget for this year, and what we were going to do. And so we added, everybody gets their birthday day off, so now that's something new that we did. And believe it or not, that went a long way. We have had people that have been so excited about being able to have their birthday off. And we're realistic, and we're saying, hey, if it doesn't work out for you to take that Tuesday, just take it within the next couple of weeks, or at least within your birthday month. But we're finding that people are really excited about taking their day off. And usually if it's in the middle of the week, it's kind of nice to have that day off. So I had to learn more self-care in order to be a good role model for my team.
Yeah, I really, really love that. Lucy, what you said resonates with me. I'd like to shift the focus a little bit towards what you're already talking about, Lucy, in terms of self-care and work-life balance, right? Because that's a question that has been asked in the chat. A lot of times what we struggle with as women leaders in any organization, or just leaders in our own spheres of influence, is modeling the caring for ourselves while balancing still getting our work done. And in many cases, our work involves caring for others, right? I'm going to ask Lucy to go first on this question of work-life balance. But first, I want to mention that work-life balance is kind of this concept that in the literature has been overcome by other terminology in the academic literature on this, because back in the 80s, when work-life balance was first talked about, researchers really studied it and realized that work-life balance sets up a false dichotomy, right, of work on the one hand, life on the other hand. And so the current terminology is actually work-life fit. And work-life fit has two meanings. It's about how your work life and your life fit together, but it's also about how the work and the life fit of any one individual fits with the work-life fit expectations of your employing organization, right? And so I'll just say I love working at Cal State Fullerton. And I'm not just saying that because Julie's on the panel, like I really do, because I feel that my work-life fit matches the institutional expectations for work-life fit. And that's just one less thing I have to consciously work to align, if that makes sense. So Lucy, do you want to speak a little bit about work-life fit and work-life balance as an organizational leader?
I love that, work-life fit, absolutely. So just as my fellow panelists shared, so I'll share a really quick story because this is why Girls Inc. has become such a passion for me. And so sometimes it, what do they say? Love what you do and you don't feel like you're working, right? But when I was in high school, I had a high school counselor who basically told me, I'm just summarizing it very quickly, basically told me, you're a Latina, you're an average student, you're probably going to end up getting pregnant, dropping out. So that's why I'm not really focusing on helping you get into college, because I had gone to him and said, hey, I want to go to college. You're not calling me in to talk to me about my options and help me out. And that was his response to me. And I could have made that, I could have just like really taken it in and said, oh yeah, maybe he's right. And I was the first in my family to go to college, but I had a support system at home that was encouraging me to pursue my education. But the reason I bring that up is because how many women get those kinds of messages early on, right? About what we can or cannot do or what we are capable of doing. And thankfully I was able to go to another counselor within my high school and he guided me. But years later, when I was working in the community and it was in a space where we talked about things that we had to overcome, I brought that up. And there was a couple other women in that room that said, oh, I know who that you're talking about. I had him and he told me the same thing as well. Thankfully, we were in a space where all of us were college educated and we were giving back to our community. And what I never really thought about was why that made me even more passionate about working with young women and making sure that they're getting the right messages in doing that. So I feel like, I was doing this work 10 years into my career before I had my daughter. And once I had my daughter, it was sort of like this epiphany of like, my daughter is going to be raised in this world that there's still, the glass ceiling hasn't completely been broken, and all of those things that we need to make sure that we are making strides in overcoming. And so for me, I love the work that I do because I feel like I'm advocating for more girls to do this, and whether they're in an affluent community or not, it's a girl issue, it's a woman issue, and they're going to be faced with some of these at one place or another. So for me, when I talk about work fit, it really is that I love what I do, but I also know that I have had to say no to some things, and I'm okay with it now. Early on in my career, I said yes to everything. And I got to a place where I was overwhelmed. And I will share this publicly because I think it is important, is that your health will pay the consequences of taking on too much and saying yes to everything. And my health did. And I'm lucky that I'm still here and I was able to overcome the challenges that I was faced with. But we really have to talk about that as well, is that, we need others in our community, in our space, to really help us do that. But I just have come to a place where I love what I do, but I also know that for my own self-preservation, I need to know when to say no and to kind of move on.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that because it leads me to think about some questions I've been having in my mind about leadership and what leadership looks like and how we create leaders. But before I get to that, Sharon or Mai, do y'all want to offer any best practices you have for work-life fit?
It's funny because Lucy actually pretty much summed up what I was going to say, because at the beginning of my story, I talked about how I won't take no for an answer, but I was going to say also how you should also learn how to say no as well, how important that is. And just one other thing that I'd like to point out is it's super interesting time right now where work-life fit is such a big thing, but at the same time, so is having a side hustle and having like doing the most you can while also not doing things for your sanity. So it definitely is interesting finding that balance. And I think it's up to the individual and what that is. Just make sure that you are feeling good about the decisions you make make sure you feel good about the place you're choosing to work and what you want to say yes to and what you don't want to say yes to.
Yeah, totally. Mai?
I think Sharon and Lucy just encapsulated what I would say as well. I mean, especially what you just said, Sharon, about the whole dichotomy and conflicting messages about work-life fit, which I also love as well. And the thing is, like, being an emerging writer and myself, you are constantly knocking on doors. Like, I literally have a spreadsheet of over 500 submissions that I've sent in. And I've been published 18 times. So if you do the math, that means I've been rejected well over 470 some odd times. That requires a lot of work. And so I actually also have to learn how to diplomatically say no and set healthy boundaries, because there's only so many things I can do. And there's only so many things I want to do. I also don't want to burn out and become that person who has, zero social interaction, zero time for self-care, So I also had to learn when the hustle needed to stop, because it was sane to do it. I mean, I'm a hard worker, but I don't want to be a workaholic. I know it's an old term, but that's kind of like the thing that that's the one endpoint I never want to be at. So I do set what I think are healthy boundaries for myself. And I do say no as diplomatically and as kindly as possible, but also I explain to people why I'm saying no. It's not because I don't want to, it's just that I have this and this and this, and I just won't be able to do it. So yeah, I'm not saying anything new. I'm just echoing what Lucy and Sharon have already shared.
Yeah. So I'm really intrigued by this concept of saying no. Because I think sometimes in our society, there are people who won't take no for an answer, rightly or wrongly. I think sometimes when women say no, those answers are not well received, right? And so there definitely is kind of conflicting messages that women get, especially I think women in leadership positions. You know, there's an academic concept called the double bind of female leadership, right? Like earlier, I think Mai mentioned the importance now in the pandemic of recognizing feelings and of checking in with people and making sure that they're feeling okay. And I, you know, Lucy also talked about this. I think that's definitely something that people now in this pandemic would like from leaders. But historically, when women demonstrated empathy and compassion and nurturing, those were not seen as leadership traits, right? Because stereotypic leadership traits were traits that were stereotypically masculine, right? Being aggressive, being decisive, not taking no for an answer. And so I'm wondering, I guess, how we make things better for the next generation of women and women leaders, especially what would you want those who work with women or those who serve women, as we do at Cal State Fullerton, what would we want to let those people know about this kind of contradictory tension about the mixed messages that girls get and that women continue to get?
I think part of it is putting yourself in an environment that allows that kind of, you know, understanding of that work-life balance or when to say no, because I've noticed that environment sometimes, because I know I was always told to like push, but sometimes you got to learn to stop pushing and to just move to a different environment completely. And that's what I did. And I noticed such a shift when I'm now at my current role and with my current crew. And it's just completely different in terms of like what we should be able to take on workload wise, what's not okay. And it's, yeah, I think really like finding the right environment is one of the biggest things. And maybe another thing that sometimes you have to remind yourself is to channel your internal Anna Delvey. And as her wise words would say is, I do not have time for this. I do not have time for you. So just reminding yourself that it's okay to say no, basically.
Love that. Mai or Lucy?
I think, oh, go ahead, Mai.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Lucy. Bey Ling, what you were saying about, you know, empathy not being considered like a traditional leadership trait. I definitely feel that, but I think that there is a small but mighty shift happening in maybe the zeitgeist, maybe. So I believe in positive propaganda. I believe that what you hear over and over again can become embedded into your brain as a thought, and a thought becomes an idea becomes an opinion, and next thing you know, it becomes a fact, quote unquote, you know? So I believe in the power of positive propaganda. And what I mean by that is, I'm just going to keep repeating things like, you know, kindness is a strength, not a weakness. It's a show of strength because you have the power not to be kind. Really, that is a power. And if you actually use that power to be kind to someone, that is enormous. That's an enormous display of strength, I think. I'm just going to keep repeating these things until people start listening, you know, and then someone else might believe it and start saying that themselves. And I really believe the power of grassroots. And I'm hearing it out in the marketplace. I shouldn't say marketplace, but out in the environment, I'm hearing that people are saying kindness is not a weakness. And I feel like I'm just going to keep repeating that and keep putting out my positive propaganda. You know, that's kind of my little take on it.
I love that, because we do have to change the culture and we have to participate in changing that culture. Lucy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think So when our educators go out to schools, you know, I have a lot of like recent graduated employees. And, you know, we talked about this whole, you know, we see this whole the great resignation, you know, and as a small organization, we did see that, you know, typically when you see turnover, it's because somebody's going to another job or they're going, you know, they're going to maybe go back to school and get their master's degree. But we saw all gamuts, right? People that were just really just thinking through what they wanted to do next and being very conflicted with that as well. Like, I love the work I'm doing, but something is going on with me, you know, and I think, you know, when we talk about this, we can't leave out the social emotional that's happening, right? And it's continuing to happen. We hear that it's happening with our kids that have gone back to school. And that is a lot of the programming that we're doing right now, frankly. The schools are saying, come in and address the needs of girls from a social emotional learning perspective, because before they can focus on their education, they have to be just okay with themselves, right? They need to learn how to just get back into society, and they need to understand that. And we need to give them those tools to be able to do that. So when we talk about empathetic leadership, that was something that I saw happening. And I know I shared a little bit of this before, but that's what we saw with our team. And when we saw people leaving for whatever reasons, pursuing other things, we did have some that said, hey, I'm going to go back to school. This is probably the best time for me to do it. But there was others that saying, I just don't even know where I want to be at right now. And I just need some space and time to just focus on me and to do that. But I really feel that, one, we've already talked about this, you know, role modeling that empathetic leadership, but it's also about, you know, when you talked about, I remember when, you know, being the CEO, you had to be tough, you know, you had to stand up and you had to like show everybody that you can do it all, you know, don't cry. Like, you know, you always like, you hear that, you know, women are told that, like, don't cry. But there's a lot of us that when we get angry or we're just, you know, or you know, that's also an emotion that we emote. And so it's really been about that balance of like, how do I learn how to control my own feelings, right? Before I can go into a room and have those difficult conversations. But I really do feel that we have to be positive, and we have to just kind of pause and step back and say, what's, if we're gonna survive as an individual in this workspace as women, and you talked about this, Bey Ling, that we are seeing less women in these pipelines to access these higher leadership roles. And to me, that's really detrimental to the future of women and girls. And so we're starting young, you know, we got to get them those mentors that will help them to go back into that pipeline of the future leadership roles. But before they can do that, they just have to be in the right social emotional space. And so for me, I think that that's really key. And I love that, Maya, of just, you know, positive propaganda, you know, and I think that that's part of what we all need to do. I mean, we all have to continue to remember where we've come and some of this and some of the space that we've lost, you know, because I think we have to make up for some of that we've lost, and we've got to get women back in there. And what I will say is, because I think you started with your question of what kind of advice would we give others, I think something that's really important is, because I've been in a workspace of being a leader before I was a parent and after being a parent. And what I really feel that's important is that as leaders, remembering that you have to give the same grace to people, whether they have children or not, or wherever they're at, you have to give them that grace, and you have to be fair. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And even as women, we don't do it. And so I think that that's really key and important, that as men or other women in leadership, that you're aware. You have to be aware of how and what policies you're putting in place to make sure that there's equal and fairness across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I would add, Lucy, because you mentioned the Great Resignation, you know, the studies are showing that the Great Resignation has not been gender neutral, right? Like, the impact of the pandemic has been felt much more by women compared to men for a whole variety of reasons. But also to Mai's point about really being positive, I really think we're in a moment of major cultural change, right? Like, there are people who are like, let's just get this all over with and go back to normal. But the reality is that past normal did not work. Flat did not work for a lot of people. And so right now we are in a national moment, and actually probably a global moment, of really being able to redo, if you will, our whole world, right? Starting with the younger generation, starting with ourselves. And so I think in closing, as we come upon the end of our time, my question to the panelists would be this. You can offer this in a motto if you want to, if you can come up with a motto, if you have a life motto. But what would be your top, let's say top two, what would be your top two tips for coming out of our present moment and really rebuilding a world that will be more equitable for women?
I'll start. I would say lead by example. If you want to have more empowered, uplifted, motivated, proactive, strong women, try to do your best to show the world what that looks like in your own life, professionally as well as personally. And it's not always easy, you know. I make tons of mistakes, but the beauty of making a mistake is that you can learn from them, and you don't grow until you learn. And so maybe that's what mistakes and lessons learned are for, is to help us navigate this confusing, beautiful, terrifying thing called life. Lessons that we learn. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Sharon or Lucy?
Yeah, I'd like to say one of the things is really like make sure you're sharing and spreading whatever's happening around you. Like bring the conversation to light with your peers, with people, because for the longest time, I felt alone in situations where I was struggling and I had no idea that other women were going through the same exact thing. So I think like bringing that dialogue constantly to those around you that you trust and just kind of bringing that up will like speed things up too. Cause I know it sped it up for me. It made me really realize situations that were unhealthy or uncomfortable and trying to get into a better environment.
Oh gosh, I think because this is what we do every day. So if I have to say two things, I think the first one is I think mentorship is really important. And sometimes people don't think that they have anything to give. Like, why would I be a mentor? But I think every story and every opportunity to have a relationship with somebody that somebody can go to and just say, hey, let me just run this by you. Like sometimes you need that objective person, right? To just hear your plight or whatever it is that you might be going with. And I think that mentorship can look in come in different ways, but it could be as little as a few hours to as much as you can. But I think don't write that off, right? Like if you have a little bit of time to give, there's a lot of organizations that are looking for mentors and to really be able to give back to young women coming up. And I think that it's incumbent on us, right? If we talk about the Great Resignation and all of this other work, I think it is important for all of us to remember to bring other women with us. I know it's kind of cliche-ish, but it really is important to remember. And whether you had more challenges than others or whether you didn't have as many, you know, I think just knowing that sometimes you have somebody there, I think is important. And then number two, I always say this is you're not going to know what you don't know until you take that risk. So be willing to take risk and be willing to take pride in your success. I don't think that as women, we take pride in our success and we have to celebrate ourselves. And because I think you said this, you're your worst critic, you know, you're like putting yourself down or whatever. And it goes back to that self-love and that self-care, right? And I think that as women, we just have to be given that permission to take risk and to be prideful of our success.
I really love that. And also Julie Virgie wrote in the chat about the importance of mentors, connecting with women who are older or more experienced. so that you can learn from them, but also connecting with women who are younger or less experienced so that you can understand their perspective and pour into the generations that come after us. So I would like to just summarize the tips that y'all have given, you know, for the people who skip the whole recording and are just reading the conclusion part of the lecture. What I heard y'all say was to lead by example, learn from mistakes, share with others and recognize you're not alone, find and be a mentor, take risks, celebrate your successes, love yourself. And what I heard also just throughout this whole panel is to bring the community and to be the community, right? And I know that we ended on a leadership note, and I'll just say that leadership isn't about a job title. It's not about a position in an organization. Leadership is about being in a position to influence change, right? So really, any one of us and anyone watching this should recognize that you can be a leader because each of us has the power to influence change in our own communities because we are that community. So with that, I will hand it back off to Dr. Bobby Porter. Thank you so much to Lucy Santana, Sharon Shares, Mai Pham. I got so much out of our panel personally, and I just am so grateful for this opportunity to have, to have had this opportunity to be in community with all of y'all.
Absolutely.
Thank
you so much. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you, everyone who, you know, invited us to come on the panel. Has been amazing. And thank you to everyone who's been watching. Really, really appreciate it.
Very well said. I mean, Sharon, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but that's what I want to do. But if we were all in person, I imagine everyone on their feet giving a loud applause right now. So to our panelists, to our moderator, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I've learned a lot. I like to consider myself to be self-reflective. I like to consider myself, don't know how self-reflective I am, but you've definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of self-care, but also what I can give back to those in need. So again, thank you for this conversation, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. This was our conversation. This is our Women's History Table Talk, all about resiliency among women and female identified people. So again, thank you to our panelists. Dr. Sha, you're my girl. I appreciate you so much for saying yes and moderating our conversation today. And again, thank you to our panelists. It wasn't easy to share your stories. I appreciate personally your willingness to be vulnerable and sharing those stories with us today. Someone just made the point about the importance of doing just that, sharing your stories, because you never know who needs to hear it and who may be encouraged by it. So thank you so much for being in community with us today. I would also like to thank our partners. A huge shout out to Alumni Engagement and Government and External Relations. We would not have been able to identify such an esteemed panel today without your support. So thank you so much for that. And as always, thank you to the President's Office. Thank you again, Julie Burgee, for providing our welcoming remarks and always being in support of this event. So it's at this point that I plug our next one. We have done many of these already. We started last September with our first table talk, and now we are coming up on our final table talk of the academic year. And it is on the topic of resiliency of the APIDA community. That event will be, again, virtual. We'll hold it via webinar on April 13th from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. So again, that one is for our PETA Heritage Month. We do celebrate 1 year, 1 month early to coincide with the academic year. And I'm very excited to have my dear friend, Dr. Chi Chung Kyung, who is the director of our News and Media Services. And he serves as co-president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Faculty and Staff Association. Chi-Chung's going to be joining us as the moderator for that event. So please sign up and we will see you there. One last plug, we have a lot of activity always going on in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Programs. So one program that I will plug, or one reminder, we have a staff development center, everyone. So please come visit us in College Park, Suite 207. There's space for you to set up. You could have even gone to the Staff Development Center to watch this event. So there's a lot going on in the Staff Development Center. We encourage you to see us there. And please, as always, be on the lookout for details for our upcoming events that you will find in our monthly newsletter. Thank you again for being a part of our conversation today, and we hope you will join us next time. Goodbye, everyone.